An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations was written and published by Adam Smith in 1776. It's a very long book and it covers many topics, so I thought I'd stick first to the topic of tariffs. And Smith uses various words like bounties, etc., to describe this. One of the first things I wanted to take care of at the beginning was the invisible hand. The invisible hand gets mentioned a lot in relation to Adam Smith, and as I read the book, I kept expecting him to talk about the invisible hand, and it never came up. And somewhere around 300 pages or so into the book, he finally mentions the invisible hand in passing, and never really mentions it again as far as I can recall. So here's a little quote here about the invisible hand. He generally, indeed, neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he is promoting it. By preferring the support of domestic to that of foreign industry, he intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which has no part of his intention. Nor is it always the worse for the society that it was no part of it. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. I have never known much good done by those who affected to trade for the public good. It is an affectation, indeed, not very common among merchants, and very few words need be employed in dissuading them from it. As far as I know, that's the only time the invisible hand ever gets mentioned, so the next time someone goes on and on about Adam Smith and the invisible hand, maybe be a little suspicious. Every derangement of the natural distribution of stock is necessarily hurtful to the society in which it takes place, whether it be by repelling from a particular trade the stock which would otherwise go to it, or by attracting towards a particular trade that which would not otherwise come to it. So Smith often uses other words like duties or bounties, that sort of thing. By extorting from the legislature bounties upon the exportation of their own linen, high duties upon the importation of all foreign linen, and a total prohibition of the home consumption of some sorts of French linen, they endeavor to sell their own goods as dear as possible. By encouraging the importation of foreign linen yarn, and thereby bringing it into competition with that which is made by our own people, they endeavor to buy the work of the poor spinners as cheap as possible. They are as intent to keep down the wages of their own weavers as the earnings of the poor spinners, and it is by no means for the benefit of the workmen that they endeavor either to raise the price of the complete work or to lower that of the rude materials. It is the industry which is carried on for the benefit of the rich and the powerful that is principally encouraged by our mercantile system. That which is carried on for the benefit of the poor and the indigent is too often either neglected or oppressed. Here's a little bit on how this sort of thing affects different citizens. To hurt in any degree the interest of any one order of citizens for no other purpose but to promote that of some other is evidently contrary to that justice and equality of treatment which the sovereign owes to all the different orders of his subjects. But the prohibition certainly hurts in some degree the interests of the growers of wool for no other purpose but to promote that of the manufacturers. Here's another little bit about the way it affects different people differently. In the restraints upon the importation of all foreign commodities which can come into competition with those of our own growth or manufacture, the interest of the home consumer is evidently sacrificed to that of the producer. It is altogether for the benefit of the latter that the former is obligated to pay that enhancement of price which this monopoly almost always occasions. It is altogether for the benefit of the producer that bounties are granted upon the exportation of some of his productions. The home consumer is obliged to pay, first the tax which is necessary for paying the bounty, and secondly, the still greater tax which necessarily arises from the enhancement of the price of the commodity in the home market. So, the difference between being a consumer or a producer. The idea that a tariff benefits a small number of home producers at the expense of a large number of consumers. Here's another little bit about consumers and producers. It cannot be very difficult to determine who have been the contrivers of this whole mercantile system. Not the consumers, we may believe, whose interest has been entirely neglected, but the producers, whose interest has been so carefully attended to. And among this latter class, our merchants and manufacturers have been by far the principal architects. In the mercantile regulations which have been taken notice of in this chapter, the interest of our manufacturers has been most peculiarly attended to, and the interest not so much of the consumers as that of some other sets of producers has been sacrificed to it. So, not a good position to be in if you're the consumer. Another little quote here about merchants and consumers. In those ignorant times it was not understood that the profits of merchants are a subject not taxable directly, or that the final payment of all such taxes must fall with a considerable overcharge upon the consumers. Something to think about. Who ends up paying for the tariff? Another important side effect of tariffs and various taxes that Smith is aware of is smuggling and black markets. The bounties which are sometimes given upon the exportation of home produce and manufactures, and the drawbacks which are paid upon the re-exportations of the greater part of foreign goods, have given occasion to many frauds, and to a species of smuggling more destructive of the public revenue than any other. In order to obtain the bounty or drawback, the goods, it is well known, are sometimes shipped and sent back to sea, but soon afterwards clandestinely re-landed in some other part of the country. So people find a way around these sorts of things, and when you interfere with the free market, there's a tendency towards smuggling and black markets. I could probably go on and on about Adam Smith's different ideas about tariffs or related terminology, but it's also worth noting that he was not in favor of a free-for-all. He indicates many places where it makes sense to limit free trade. So here's a little quote. To expect, indeed, that the freedom of trade should ever be entirely restored in Great Britain is as absurd as to expect that an Oceania or Utopia should ever be established in it. So he mentions a few important places where you wouldn't want to just have pure free trade, but that you have certain national security interests, such as your military or your food security. Just because your neighbors are better at farming or better at making weapons doesn't mean you should rely entirely on the outside market for these things. So there are certain exceptions and places where Smith sees a point in protecting the home market. So a little quote here from Smith on the importance of protecting your country. The first duty of the sovereign, that of protecting the society from the violence and invasion of other independent societies, can be performed only by means of a military force. But the expense both of preparing this military force in time of peace and employing it in time of war is very different in the different states of society in the different periods of improvement. Smith also talks about the importance of a nation's home agriculture. I'll end with a quote that I enjoy from Smith on the importance of understanding the long-term view and understanding the long-term impact of today's behaviors. If we only behold, says he, the actions of the husbandman in the seed time, when he casteth away much good corn into the ground, we shall account him rather a madman than a husbandman. But when we consider his labors in the harvest, which is the end of his endeavors, we shall find the worth and plentiful increase of his actions. So a farmer might look crazy when he's putting seeds into the ground, but that's only if you haven't seen the full course of events when he reaps the harvest at the end.